Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. Today I want to do a spontaneous video. It will be on philosophy again, but this time I will not be reading from any kind of text. You can see what I have on my screen now. It's just the window that is the recording software, so OBS Studio. And here I have Emacs in a small window. I am using the GNOME desktop environment on Linux, GNU Linux, but don't worry about it. The point is that I want this to be consistent with the theme I am about to expound on. So I think I will just move this a bit to the side. So what I want is I want to see that it is saying, it is informing me that it is recording actually. So I don't want to actually speak without it doing its work. And here I can just write the title of this presentation, this talk, this discussion, this friendly discussion between me and you. So I want this to be about perfectionism, improvisation, and insecurity. Or maybe we can have it like this. So perfectionism, insecurity, and improvisation. So the theme is exactly this binary, this not binary, this duality of perfectionism and insecurity. Because in my experience, how I lived those things, those emotions, perfectionism was rooted in insecurity. It was rooted in a certain set of fears and doubts and denial of my own condition. So let me explain how this goes, and we will get into the theme, and then I will proceed to tell you more about my creative process over the last few years. I used to spend an inordinate amount of time on an email, for example. I would compose a simple email, and it would be like, I can actually write it here. So I would make a very generic statement like, okay, thanks. Okay, thanks. And then I would obsess about this point. Is it written like this, or is it okay, dot, thanks? Or is it okay, comma, thanks, exclamation mark? This sort of thing. So I would obsess about this sort of thing. And then, of course, I would check the language, every single word, to make sure that it is correct, that no comma is absent, that the statement is perfect in terms of grammar, that I have used the right word, and so on and so forth. So it was a laborious process to write a generic email, let alone one of those fancy ones. Those were an ordeal in their own right. They were extremely difficult. So at some point, as I was doing this, I was doing it for a fairly long time. At some point, I paused and I was looking at this email and I was like, why am I doing this actually? Why do I need to pay that much attention to those minutiae, to all those details? Do they really matter? Is what I am doing here really that significant? Is it really that consequential? Is it really that the ramifications are such that I have to, the implications are such that I have to really think about it that much? Is my duty here really that burdensome? And I thought, no, it isn't. This is just a simple email. It is inconsequential. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Sorry, it doesn't matter at all. So I just hit the send button. And it was okay as an email, but then I noticed that it had some errors. And the first time I did this, I worried a lot. I was like, I stressed, and I was like, oh my goodness, The other person will think that I'm an idiot. They will notice all the errors. I am doomed. They will come at me and basically point all those errors out, and I will look like a fool, and that's basically the end of me. I have been exposed. So I realized as I was going through those thoughts, and this pattern repeated itself for a few times, I realized that the reason for this apparent perfectionism, this apparent attention to detail when it comes to the composition of an email, was actually insecurity about what? About being rejected. The insecurity that others will not like me. And in not liking me, they would reject me. And in rejecting me, therefore, I would be alone. So fundamentally, this apparent perfectionism, this apparent insistence on correctness, was actually about the fear of being alone, the fear of solitude, the fear of being rejected for who you are. So what I was doing basically through this perfectionism, I was faking it because I was no longer myself. I was trying to create the image, the impression, the outwardness of someone else, of someone who is Mr. Perfect. Because I am not perfect. But this someone who was doing the emailing had to be perfect. So it was no longer me. There was no longer any kind of correspondence between my actuality and this persona, this idol of myself that I was putting up. This was an impeccable person, someone who made no mistakes. Someone who wanted to be liked, who wanted to fit in, but to fit in not for who they were, but to fit in as someone else, to fit in by wearing a mask, and by making this mask seem as if it was the real appearance. So as I was thinking about this, so obviously this is not just about emails. I'm just using the email as a trivial example, but it also, of course, is a pattern of behavior that applies everywhere. Like my hair, I would have to pay lots of attention to my hair. Is it perfect? Is it flowing? Is it in place? Is it flying around? What is it doing? My facial hair, did I shave properly? Did I do this? Did I do that? My shirt, does it fit nicely? That sort of thing. So I would always be insecure about those trivia because I was afraid that those imperfections would be the reason for being rejected and then for being in solitude, being in isolation. So that was my bane, basically. I was dreading that eventuality. I was thinking that what will I do if I let them know my true self? What will happen? Because once they know who I truly am, me as an imperfect being, once they know that I am imperfect, they will not like me anymore. So this was in all sorts of behaviors. But now I'm using just the email here, the trivial example. And this is something I always do. I like to use a trivial example because if it applies to something small, of course it applies ever more to something larger in magnitude, to something more important, relatively speaking. But I use the small things so that you understand that even in the small things, we tend to aggrandize them in our mind. We tend to enlarge them and to think that they are super important and that whatever happens has to revolve around this minor thing that in our mind it is the center of the universe. So I was afraid that I would expose my imperfections, and in exposing them, I would be promptly rejected for not being good enough, for being an incomplete person, a person manqué. And this idea, this bias, is of course a bias, a prejudice against myself, and against one's self. But it also is a bias that exalts other people, that elevates them in your mind. You think that they are perfect, and that for you to be in their company, you too must be perfect. But no one is perfect. That's the thing. No one is perfect. People are imperfect in all sorts of ways. There isn't perfection in human affairs. What humans do is always lacking in some respect. It is always inadequate in some way. Those plans that we really are meticulous about are less flawed, but they are not perfect, strictly speaking. But when you think that everybody else is perfect, then of course you are insecure. So what I started doing is I started observing other people. Before, I was biased in favor of the view that they are perfect, and I wouldn't recognize their imperfections. I wouldn't see them. But when this idea occurred to me that maybe the others are not perfect either, I started paying attention. And I started listening more carefully to what they were saying. Or I started observing their behavior. And I noticed in them a part of me. I noticed in them a sense of faking it, a sense of perfectionism in the sense I am describing here. They too were insecure. They too were afraid in some way that they don't fit in, they will be rejected, they are not good enough. So when this realization embedded itself, of course, this happened over an extended period of time. It's not like the morning I came up with this idea and by the evening I was freed from the falsehoods that held me hostage before. It took an extended period of time, several years actually, to really comprehend this principle and to understand how far it goes. But when I realized eventually that others are imperfect as well, I was essentially free because I had managed to lift that burden off of my shoulders, and it was no longer a problem for me to actually compose an email and hit send without actually caring about it. Because if it is imperfect, for example, if I wrote okay, thanks, and placed a period instead of an exclamation mark, if you think that it should be an exclamation mark, that's your problem. It's not my problem anymore. Because I said what I wanted to say. If there is some minor problem over there, you don't need to pay attention to it all that much. If you are insisting on that minor point, then definitely you need to work on that. You need to work on not being pedantic, because you are paying attention to small things and you are thinking that they are major things, and they are not. So as I understood that, I stopped being perfectionist and I started going to the other end sorry, of being creative and improvising. And you may not realize this, but all the videos I do on philosophy, for example, where I have this long text, maybe it's 6,000 words, and I am reading from the text. this text, I write it on the day I do the presentation. I don't spend a month perfecting the text and then doing it. I write it in the morning. I start writing it in the morning, and by the time I am finished, it's evening, so I hit the record button and I do it in one go. And also the recording. It's 1 hour long, and I do it in one go as well. So you will notice in my recordings that sometimes I make a mistake. I mispronounce a word, or I misread something, or that sort of thing, you know. So I am not hiding my imperfections, and I am doing this in one go on purpose, because I want to be honest about who I actually am, what this is. This is me. This is me unfiltered, unedited, imperfect. This describes my creative process in general, which is, to borrow a term that is used in painting, it is alla prima. In painting, painters have this idea of this technique, so-called wet on wet. When they are using oil colors, you know, the color itself, the actual substance is humid. So you can apply it on the canvas with the brush. But when it dries, you can no longer work with it because it's dry. All you can do is put more wet color on top of it. But this notion of alla prima, this notion of wet on wet, means that you are applying colors while they are still manipulable, while you can still work with them. So the result that you are getting is something that is the product of the moment. So everything is in a state of flux, and you are putting your thought into it, your technique into it, and something comes out of it. But it wasn't premeditated. No, premeditated is the wrong word. It wasn't meticulously designed down to every detail. Premeditated it can be because you have an idea. You are like, okay, I want to paint a landscape, or I want to paint, I don't know, a portrait or whatever. And you are like, okay, let me do a portrait. Let me do the landscape or whatever. But the technique, the way you are doing it, is you are doing it in one go. And you let the work have a life on its own, in the sense that it is a snapshot of your actuality, of that situation, in that specific moment, in those states of affairs, the applicable conditions of that case. And this is exactly what I'm doing right now. This is imperfect. This is alla prima. This is something that I am just improvising. I'm not reading from anywhere. I'm just staring at a camera, and I am talking about this theme that I have over here, about perfectionism, insecurity, and improvisation. And and I am doing philosophy. I am showing you the imperfect, and I am telling you about something that is profound. And the profundity here is honesty. Because let's go back to that moment when I realized what I was doing with the email. At that moment, when I first asked the question, why am I doing this? That was the moment I was being honest with myself. I started being honest because I was noticing that I was not being honest with myself. I was hiding stuff from my conscience. I was not thinking about things. I was taking them for granted. But in not thinking about them, I was just not assessing whether those thoughts, those patterns of behavior corresponded with my actuality or not. Whereas by thinking, by bringing this question to the forth, by bringing it to the foreground, I was able to be honest about it. I was able to be introspective, and through that introspection to understand that my behavior was not consistent with my condition, with my actuality. So that was the first step. The first step was to be honest with myself. But through this process of faking it, through this concern of fitting in, through this impulse to appear as perfect to whatever audience, I was still lying towards others. Lying not in the sense of tricking them, of being manipulative, but in the sense of masking, in the sense of hiding stuff, in the sense of putting on a facade, putting on, displaying a persona, an idol of me, which was not me, a version of me which had nothing to do with me. It looked like me. Yes, because I cannot actually change my face. It looked like me, yes, but it was not me. It was a fake. So I was still lying towards others. I had reached the point where I was honest with myself, but I was still dishonest towards others because I was still perfectionist in this sense. So the next step was to actually be honest with everyone, to be honest consistently, to be honest throughout. And this is where I started developing this way of expressing myself, this way of being creative, of alla prima, of doing it in one go. So all my writings over the last few years, all my works are imperfect in this regard. They are all honest in this regard, because they are showing you what really comes out in the moment. There isn't like a process of deliberation and of back and forth for days so that I can make something perfect. Because perfect is not me anymore. And what I want to do is I want to show you me. And to connect this to this fear that I mentioned earlier, this insecurity of being rejected, I realized that if you are being rejected for who you are, then you simply haven't found the right people. You are simply trying to be friends with the wrong sort of fellows. They really have different interests, different priorities, so they are not into you, and that's fine. You shouldn't be obsessing with them. Why are you assigning all that value to those specific people? Why do you want those people to like you? This is what I thought. And the answer is that you shouldn't be assigning too much value to people. If someone doesn't like you and you think they should, that is your problem. Why do you think that they should like you? Let them be indifferent. Let them ignore you. That's fine. Just be honest about your condition, and you will eventually attract people close to you who are in the same wavelength, who have the same vibes as you. So you won't be lonely when you are honest, because then you will truly have company, the company of people who actually are like you, people who are accepting you for who you are. So you won't have to keep faking it the whole time. Because imagine if you are accepted through your facade, through your mask, you will have to wear that mask forever. Because the moment you take off the mask, then you will be rejected again. And then you will be ridiculed for appearing, for exposing yourself as a fraud in the open, in their company. So you don't want to do that. My dog is here and wants some attention, so there is that as well. So yes, this is the idea. And I stopped caring when I started doing this. This all comes together with my philosophical disposition, of course. But fundamentally, I stopped caring about being accepted or not by others. Because I realized that it doesn't make any difference to me, because if I am fake and I am being accepted for being fake, that harms me because it contradicts my actual condition. So I don't want that anyway. But if I am honest, then I am calm. I am relaxed. I am freed from all those burdens. I feel lightness. So I am okay. I am healthy. I am healthy. I am sane. I am fine. And then if I am accepted for being sane and healthy and fine, that's a bonus. That's good. That's an extra. But that's not what will make me actually happy or actually stable. That is coming afterwards. First, I am stable. First, I have reached this point of not worrying about being accepted, about the opinions of others. First, I have come to this point of stability, and then you are welcome. Then you can have that extra, which is the acceptance of other people, but that's a bonus. That's a nice thing to have, but no longer the thing that you are looking for. So this is the idea, folks, what I wanted to talk to you about. I think perfectionism is fundamentally wrong. I think when you are obsessing about something that is not important, you are hiding something. Not hiding it from me. I don't care. I don't care if you are hiding stuff from me. I mean, if we are in correspondence or whatever. But from you. Are you hiding stuff from me? What are you afraid of? What are you trying to run away from? Have you ever considered those questions? Have you ever reflected on your condition? Have you ever contemplated the state you are in? Have you ever really introspected yourself? Because if you don't do that, you will take your perfectionism as a virtue. You will brag about it. You will say, look, I have high standards and I want to be, good at everything. But that's not true. If you have high standards, that's something that you make happen through your work. It's not something that you dread. When you are dreading it, when you have an ideology towards it, because perfectionism is a disposition, it's an ideology, okay? When you have an ideology towards the perfect, then you are simply saying that you want to be perfect. You are simply being an ideologue. You are no longer doing excellence. You are proclaiming excellence. And those are two different things. Of course, I am in favor of excellence. I am in favor of doing the right thing. I am in favor of perfecting your art, your skill. Be good at what you are doing. Be better as a human being. Be better as a speaker. Be better as a programmer. And be better in everything that you are doing. That's fine. But when you are simply stating that you want, that this is your ambition to have high standards or whatever, when you have this ideology, that is, of the perfect, then you are hiding something. There is something there that you need to be honest about with yourself. Forget about honesty towards others. This comes afterwards. But with yourself, you have to recognize what it is that you are running away from, what it is that you are afraid of. And in that realization, you will gradually lift that burden off of your shoulders. And you will be suddenly free to do things with a renewed impetus, with a renewed kind of vitality. There is this ancient myth there is, it's called Sisyphus, the myth of Sisyphus. It's written like I'm not sure actually how it is written. Sisyphus, I think it's written like this in English, or maybe Sisyphos. But anyhow, there is this ancient Greek myth. So there is this person who is rolling a boulder uphill. So it's a large rock, and he is pushing the rock uphill, and he struggles. And when he is close to the top, he rolls back to the beginning, back to the footsteps of the mountain, and he has to do it again. And he has to keep rolling the rock, and he keeps doing this for an eternity. What does this symbolize? This tells us about someone who does not understand their actuality. This is a person who is carrying burdens. And fundamentally, the burdens that we always carry with us are the burdens in here, the burdens in our mind, the burdens that all those values that we assign to things. We want to assume that something is ours, and we want to carry it like my fame, my awesomeness, my cool attitude, my this, my that, my insecurity, my everything. We want to have ownership over it. We want to have it with us the whole time. And we don't recognize that those things can be thought of in a new light. They can be thought of anew. And in thinking of them anew, we can remove the value from them. We can change the evaluation we have made. And in doing that, we can basically neutralize them, normalize them. And in normalizing them, render them irrelevant to our disposition in the moment, in the here and now. For example, with your insecurities, with this perfectionism. The moment you start being honest with yourself, the moment you stop assigning value to others, the moment you stop saying the others are perfect, the moment you recognize that the others are imperfect, like you are removing a certain evaluation that you have made. And this basically makes that boulder that Sisyphus is pushing, it makes it smaller and smaller and smaller, until eventually it is but a pebble. And you just throw it away, and you walk up the mountain, and you can now observe the view, freed from all those burdens. Now you can see the horizon. You can see all those possibilities that open up before you. It's a whole new world. So that's all for today, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. I did this presentation in the spirit of the topic, but the problem here, and the reason I am writing my presentations, is now you have to watch the video. You cannot just read the transcript. So that's unfortunate. And this is why in the other presentations I will still keep writing, but I will do it the way I do, alla prima, as I said. So you will be able to also check the transcript, and you will be able to skip the video if you need. And also the good thing about having it in written form is that it works also with search, that sort of thing. So thank you very much for your attention, folks. Goodbye for now. Take care. And GNOME worked well, so I am okay with this. Let's see. Bye.